On this edition of Larry the Golf Guy, we welcome Jim Nugent to the podcast. Jim is someone who has worked in the golf media space for numerous decades and had the insight from his time at Golfweek Magazine that with the impact of the internet on print golf journalism, why not launch a digital-only golf news publication? And so was born the Global Golf Post in 2010. We talked with Jim about how he was introduced to the game as a caddie, the pivotal role that caddying played for him in shaping his life, his career in golf media, including his time at Golfweek Magazine and, of course, his founding the Global Golf Post, his longtime involvement with the American Junior Golf Association, his work with the Annika Foundation and the Amateur Golf Alliance, and much more. So up next on this edition of Larry the Golf Guy, the founder and publisher of Global Golf Post, Jim Nugent. Well, welcome to another edition of Larry the Golf Guy. I am so pleased today to welcome to the program Jim Nugent, who is done so much in golf and media space, founder of the Global Golf Post. We'll get into all of that, and grew up and still resides in where I used to live for a while, which on the North Shore of Chicago. We'll talk about that as well. Jim, welcome to the program. Thank you so much for making time for us today.
Larry, I'm honored to be on. Thank you for having me.
My pleasure. So, just to kind of go back a little bit to when you got started, and as I often like to do with guests, to give our listeners some context, mentioned growing up in the North Shore of Chicago, and I take it from what I've read that your first introduction to the game was caddying at Sunset Ridge in Northfield, and maybe chat about how that came about and what that was like.
Sunset Ridge was a 15-minute bicycle ride from where I lived, and my parents made it pretty clear to me early on that if I was going to go to a college of any reputation, I was going to have to contribute financially. And so at age 12, I lied about my age. You had to be 13, but at 12, I started caddying at Sunset Ridge. I did so from that point on until through my junior year in college. And it was a life-altering opportunity. It's why I'm doing what I'm doing in golf. If I were to cut through all of the stuff, I learned the game, but as importantly, I learned about life. I learned about people who were good people, and I learned about people who were not so good people. And it causes you as a young man to say, well, I want to be more like this person rather than that person.
Right.
I grew up with a bunch of guys. My two brothers were part of it, Michael and Mark. They were a little bit younger than me. And we grew up with a bunch of guys that today, if we all showed up in a bar together, we'd pick up right where we left off when we were 20 years old and weren't looping anymore. Best of friends. The club was closed on Mondays, so we would go play golf. We would go to Cub games and sit in the bleachers when they were home. We'd play softball on the driving range on Monday night with the members. And those were formative years for me. And as I said, it goes a long way toward explaining why I've been in the golf business for most of my adult life.
Yeah, I mean, did it give you the bug to start playing as well? Or, I mean, was that a big part of growing up on the North Shore in terms of that aspect of the game?
Not really. I wasn't a particularly good player back then. We got to play once a week on Wednesday mornings, and I played at it more than anything else. I didn't start to get serious about trying to play at a decent level until very, very late in my college career. My father called me at Christmas, my senior year at Georgetown University. He said, I just thought you'd like to know that I've joined a private club, North Shore Country Club, which I had never, ever considered that my father would be that interested in doing something like that. And I looked at it as a great opportunity. So I graduated and decided not to caddy after my senior year. I took the summer off. I'd made enough money at a part-time job in Washington, D.C. that year that I didn't really need to work. And so I decided to try and get good. I tried to become a player, and I worked very, very hard with an assistant pro who was an instructor. And he took me from being a caddy swing guy to a guy that could play the game a little bit. And over the next 20 years, I was able to play down to about a three handicap. I could
Oh,
keep
that's
it,
good. Yeah.
I kept it comfortably around 75. I wasn't going to scare anybody that was a scratch player, but I felt good enough that I could go out to most golf courses and not embarrass myself.
Yeah. I mean, North Shore is a wonderful course. You and I have our mutual friend, John Lynch, who's, been a member there
Yes.
a long time, who's of course, a longtime Latham colleague of mine. And,
Yes.
it's, and I want to sort of loop back a little bit to one other caddying thing I'm going to bring up, and it sort of just brings to mind the old Western Open. Again, you and I are not too far apart in age, and so older than probably many people listening to this. But I mean, the Western Open used to, rotate among all these courses in Chicago area, and Chicago just has so many great golf courses. Not just the private clubs, but all the towns seemingly have their own clubs, municipal clubs. And then there's the Cog Hills and Pine Meadows that are public access, but privately owned. So it's just a great, great golf town. And of course, North Shore, famous among other reasons. I think the last time we had an amateur win the U.S. Open was Johnny Goodman back in the day.
That's
Um,
correct.
a lot of great stuff. But just talking about the Western Open, back in those days, it did rotate when you were caddying, rotate among different courses. And I guess, was at Sunset Ridge in '72, and you had a chance to caddy in that for the reigning Masters champion. What was that like?
I remember every step I took that week. When they announced, probably sometime in 1970 or 71 that the Western Open was coming to my golf course, as I called it, where I caddied, I was like, wow, this is going to be something else. And I was a little bit younger than most of the good caddies there, but I was tall. And then the caddy master liked me because I was pretty reliable. And so I drew for the 1972 Western Open, as it was called then, Charlie Cootie,
Right.
who had won the Masters the year before. And Charlie Cootie treated me like a gentleman. He was polite and just a delight to caddy for. He never once asked me for a yardage. He
Hmm.
never once asked me which way a putt was going to break. And you know what? I was completely fine with that. And Charlie Cootie for we went 6 rounds. He made the cut. He played a practice round. He played the pro-am 4 rounds. Finished in the middle of the pack. I think he might have made like $3,000 or something back then. And he paid me $150, which was more money than I'd ever seen at one time
Wow.
in my life. And so I was grateful. And to this day, just being in the golf business, I bump into Charlie from time to time. I
Oh,
see him at the
wow.
Masters.
Wow.
I saw him at the Walker Cup at Seminole, where one of his grandsons was playing. And
Yeah.
I never failed to go up and reintroduce myself to him. He claims to remember me. I highly doubt that, but it's nice of him to say that anyhow.
That is so cool. That is really cool. I love it. So you mentioned Georgetown. You go to Georgetown. From what I've seen, you were thinking maybe as you entered college about becoming a journalist. And then, I guess saw some of the writing skills of some of your fellow students. Obviously, Georgetown's a great school. And maybe started saying, oh, I'm not sure if I'm going to do this. But from what I've seen, you kind of had you mentioned how caddying changed your life. It sounds like you had what maybe we could call like a sliding doors type moment with one of your loops during the summer that kind of reoriented you career-wise, right?
It was the Watergate years, and I was a student of Watergate. I probably was fairly liberal on the scale back then,
Yeah.
being, 18, 19 years old, probably anti-Nixon. Thought I was probably going to be the next Woodward and Bernstein. Got to
Yeah.
Georgetown, found out that I really couldn't write worth a damn. Came back home one summer, was talking to one of my regular loops who was in the media business. And he says, "You don't want to write. You need to make some money so you can join this club. You got to go into sales." I was like,
Hmm.
okay, that makes sense. So I got steered away from journalism, never lost my love, respect, and admiration for journalists,
Hmm.
but got steered down the commercial path of journalism. And that's where I've spent most of my career.
So let's. What were your? I know you ended up a little bit later at Golfweek Magazine, but what were kind of your initial experiences in media after college, and kind of how did you end up then making your way to Golf Week?
You know, I read a book called The Powers That Be, my
Okay.
senior year at Georgetown, written by the great writer David Halberstam, now
Yeah.
deceased.
Yeah.
And it was the history of the New York Times, the Washington Post, CBS, and I'm forgetting something, four different companies, very, very prominent. And I thought, you know what? This is what I want to do. This is my life's work. I'm going to work for companies like this. Oh, I know. The fourth one was Time Inc., the great
Oh,
Time Inc.
sure. Yeah.
And my aspiration was to go to work for Time Inc. And what I really wanted to do was go to Sports Illustrated. And I dreamed one day that I was going to run Sports Illustrated.
Mm.
Um, Personal stuff got in the way. My father died.
Mm.
My mother, I'm the oldest of four children. I had new responsibilities that I hadn't anticipated
Hmm.
in Chicago. Time Inc. was going to ship me off to New York, and that just wasn't going to fly.
Yeah.
And so I left Time Inc. sadly because it broke my heart. I thought, boy, I had the opportunity, and here I am leaving it voluntarily. Did some work with a friend of mine in a broadcast company. Heard about this magazine that was getting reorganized called Golf Week. Never heard of it, although I grew up reading the other weekly golf news magazine that had been prominent since the 50s called Golf World.
Right.
And so I called the new owner of Golf Week and I said, I think I can help you here. And over about a 15-year period, I helped build the team that made Golf Week a viable competitor in the golf media landscape. We were an upstart. We were a bit scrappy. We weren't part of the Golf Digest organization, which was owned originally by the New York Times and then Condé Nast. And that's where I entered the golf industry. That's where I started to make my way through the golf industry. And they were wonderful years until the thing that Al Gore invented, the internet, spelled doom, and I knew that it was time for me to move on.
It is amazing watching the transformation that's happened in the print media business. I mean, you mentioned Sports Illustrated. I mean, I was a subscriber, I think, from the time I was 10 years old to SI, and over the years, it had some great golf people. Obviously, Dan Jenkins was legendary
Sure,
with his
sure.
golf pieces, but I mean, later on when they created that kind of golf insert or whatever they called it in SI, and
Golf
people,
Plus, yes,
right, Golf
yes.
Plus, exactly right, that's what I'm thinking of. And people like Alan Shipnuck, Michael Bamberger, both really good writers. And now you look at it today, I mean, it's not even, it's like I don't even know what it is, a licensing thing. It's like a shell of its former self, and all those folks have sort of moved on. So the internet just wreaked havoc. And you kind of, I'm impressed. You kind of saw this happening or experiencing the front end of it. And that's kind of what it sounds like led to your idea about Global Golf Post, right? I mean, is to sort of, do something like Golf Week, but without the physical paper, right?
You're exactly right. So as I recall, it was around 2007 or eight. I didn't want to stick around to pull the sheet over a business that I'd spent 15 years of my adult life trying to build.
Right.
And so I left and I went and I did some work for the PGA Tour. And while I was doing that, I came up with this idea that you could do Golf Week or Golf World all over again, but without paper, without postage, without ink. And more importantly, I could deliver it to you in Los Angeles on Monday morning before you were out of bed and tell you exactly what happened at the US Amateur at Marion and tell you exactly how Scotty Scheffler won in Memphis. So in '08, I raised some private capital through '08 and '09. We launched in 10, and the reaction of the industry was, who are these pirates and what's the under on how long they're going to last?
Yeah.
And, I understood that. We're a startup. We didn't have a ton of money. The best thing we had going for us was I'd been in the business long enough that I had enough customers, advertisers, mostly equipment people that said, well, let's give Nugent a chance.
Yeah.
And I was fortunate to attract some really high quality journalists,
Hmm.
many of whom had been victims of the internet transition, the digital transition. They were no longer working full time, or they were no longer making the kind of wages that they once did. And they bought into my harebrained scheme. And by the time, so we launched in January 10, and I'll never forget this. In July, I was over at the Open Championship. It would happen to be in St. Andrews. And I ran into Mike Davis, at
Hmm.
the time, the chief executive officer of the USGA, a guy that I knew a little bit, but not particularly well. And we shook hands in the street. And he said, by the way, I just want you to know that Global Golf Post is the gold standard in golf journalism.
Wow.
And I just about melted in front of the headquarters of the R&A building when he told me that. But from that moment forward, I knew that we were onto something different. I knew that we were onto something special. I knew that we were going to be able to make a difference. And from that moment, I never thought for a second that we weren't going to be able to be successful and also influential.
That's awesome. I love that. And as you know, for people who may not be familiar with it, I mean, you have various different products, right? I mean, you have the digital magazine we're talking about. There's, as I understand, there's sort of a newsletter. I think it's GGP Plus, and then there's longer form stuff I love called Second Wind. I think with a nod maybe to Herbert Warren Wind. And so you kind of cover all these different bases, right? It's interesting. I
We
mean, was that something that just sort of those various products developed over time to meet different needs, or kind of what was your thinking behind
it's evolutionary. So we set out to be simply the digital descendant of Golf Week and Golf World Magazine. I had no greater vision than doing that. And then other opportunities came about. We realized that we had built a brand. We had great writers that we could maybe be a part of the conversation beyond just publishing our digital magazine on Monday morning and then being quiet. Social media arose, and it gave us a chance to have our voice heard more frequently than just on Monday morning. And so we started GGP Plus, which is a daily newsletter that's free. The magazine remains free. It's advertising supported. But as has happened a couple of times during the digital world that we live in, uh, the space has evolved, and advertising is a much more difficult proposition than it was when we started in 2010. It's become imperative that digital publishers have a second revenue stream, a
it?
second source of revenue other than relying on the golf equipment and the golf travel business. So we launched a business service called GGP Biz, which is published every Friday, once a week. It's a B2B publication aimed at the industry
Hmm.
with one piece of original golf business journalism that we provide, but then linking people in the industry to stories and articles that we think are important, but they're outside of the golf ecosystem. They're not at Golf Digest. They're not at Golf
Hmm.
Channel. They're at the Financial Times. They're at CNBC. They're at Bloomberg Business. And that's been extremely successful, and we're thrilled with that. Late last year, as you pointed out, we launched a second subscription service that we call Second Wind. It is, quite frankly, a nod to Herbert Warren Wind. We're paying homage to the America's best ever golf writer. It's longer form journalism. And I use the word longer in place of the word long because long once meant 10,000 words. Well,
Yeah.
nobody's got an appetite anymore for 10,000 words on their phone or their
Yeah.
iPads. So
Right.
we're writing 3 to 4,000 word essays twice a month, delivered on Sunday, feature writing. And it's our best stuff. It's our best writers delivering our best stuff. And it's off to a great start. And we're very, very optimistic about the future of this. But when you combine Second Wind and GGP Biz, we're making real progress in developing revenue beyond equipment advertising and travel advertising, and it's making a difference on our business. Did I see this in 2010 when we launched? Not a chance.
Well, it's great that the way I love the way it's evolved. I mean, maybe it's just sitting here as we're in 2026 and you're, a little more than 15 years past when you launched. And just looking at the landscape today, which you're a lot more fluent on, obviously, than I am, but just from where I sit, I mean, there's just so much out there. There's, people, the golf people on Substack. I mean, out here, Jeff Shackelford, who I know a little bit, who lives pretty close to where I do out here, has his quadrilateral. There's the no laying up and fried egg folks who have just built these. I don't know how to describe it. I mean, golf media companies, that not only are doing, the type of digital written material that you're talking about, but have all these podcasts and almost building communities and stuff. But there's a lot of golf content, obviously, from those two folks. I mean, it's just such a there's so many folks in the space, so to speak. I mean, how do you kind of assess the state of golf media today and where you guys sit in it? You've made great progress and it's super impressive, but I'm just curious as a knowledgeable observer, kind of how you look at the landscape these days.
Well, as a longtime player, as a longtime veteran of the industry, I'm very pleased to see how golf media has and is evolving in the digital age. There's a lot of good things happening, and you've referenced a couple of those, and we're part of that new digital media ecosystem in golf. And I think that's good and healthy for the game. Um, it's competitive. We're all competing for eyeballs. There's only so many golfers in the United States, although I'm pleased to say that we have an international edition, so we can reach beyond the US. But we're all competing for eyeballs. We're all competing for limited bandwidth time, if you will, for those eyeballs. And so it's a very competitive environment, but it's a healthy environment. And the competition, I believe, is making all of us better. Some of these new entrants have made us better. Just as when we launched, I think that we helped make Golf Digest and Golf Magazine, the stalwarts, better back in 2010, 2011, and 12.
Yeah, for sure. It is funny as I just think about this. I mean, my dad who introduced me to the game, started getting Golf Digest when I was 9 years old. And, first him and then me. I've been a subscriber for what are we going on now? 50 plus years, 55 years. And I get Golf Magazine. I did get, Golf World back in the day. But it's just so interesting. And again, I'm super impressed you saw this trend and the disruption early on. But I get the magazines. And I get them digitally too, so I can look on the iPad. I mean, be honest with you, Jim, I never read them anymore. And why is that? Because by the time they come to my mailbox or they get, emailed to me on a monthly basis, it's like, I don't all most of the stuff like Takeoff Digest, I've already read online because I get emails from them all the time. There's just not a lot that's new in there. On the other hand, in terms of longer form stuff, I get, the Golfer's Journal, which I'm sure you're familiar with, which is
Sure.
out
Yep.
not far from me down in Orange County.
Yep.
And that's very appealing because those are sort of long form. First of all, it's beautifully, I mean, and that's a physical book, although you can get that obviously online too, but It's beautifully put together, and they've kind of developed a community too. But it's, all sorts of interesting deep dives into stuff. Like that, like a perfect example. Like, we've had the U.S. Amateur at Merion. They had this long article about, and I'm forgetting the fellow's name, the historian at Merion, with these beautiful pictures of all the memorabilia at Merion and stuff. And that is worth, that doesn't expire. That's not stale, I should say, when I get it every month. Anyways, it's just a few observations. It's just it is an interesting space, but I mean the stalwarts, I think the monthly product is not the value it used to be. I used to just could not wait to get to the mailbox back in the day to get Golf Digest. And as you've observed and as you've done with with Global Golf Post, it's just such a different world today.
It's a completely different world than one that you and I grew up in, and quite frankly, there's parts of it I miss. The tactile experience with
Yeah.
a Golf Digest or a Golf World, or even the Wall Street Journal or the New York Times, I rather miss that. But I've also been flexible enough that I read all those publications, but I read them on my iPad or on my
Right.
phone.
Right.
I think, and I don't mean to disparage Golf Magazine or Golf Digest because they are competitors, but I have friends in both of those places, including the longtime editor of Golf Digest, who I respect and admire immensely, Jerry Tardy.
Yeah.
But as it was for me in 2009, the writing is a bit on the wall.
Yeah.
And at some point in time, the physical product that they produce, the magazine, the print magazine, is probably no longer going to exist. There'll be some point in time when the line of revenue and the line of costs cross,
Right.
and it just doesn't make any sense any longer to uh, print and mail a monthly edition. And they're not monthly any longer. They're, I don't know, at best they're 10 times a year. They might be
Right. They're not monthly.
nine or
That's
eight
right.
times a year. But at least in the case of Golf Digest, I can't speak so much to Golf Magazine and Golf.com. Uh, Golf Digest is more a brand than it is a physical magazine, and they've diversified nicely. They have a good digital presence. They take digital seriously.
Yeah.
The brand itself will continue for decades to come. Of that, I have no doubt. But there may not be a physical magazine that arrives in your mailbox from time to time.
Yeah. No, no, I'm sure that is true. Just interesting how that whole space has changed, and you guys have been a big part of that, and being forerunners in many respects. Let me sort of touch on a couple of other things with you that I thought were so interesting in reading about your career. And that's one of them is the American Junior Golf Association. So I played a lot of junior golf growing up, and nothing, I grew up in Connecticut. I competed at the state level. That's about as far as my game got me back then. But the AJGA was founded, I think, in 78. So that would be when I was 17. So I was kind of aging out of things when that was just getting started. But wow, look back now and I'm pretty friendly with Ann Walker, who's the coach of the Stanford women's team, and always go down and watch them at the NCAA's, which is now at La Costa. And I've watched them, the Mega Ganes, the Rachel Hecks, the Rosangs of the world that they've played on some of the USGA events that have been here. I just, all of whom, all these college players, grown up with this AJGA, which is like, always strikes me like a pro tour. Anyways, I know you've been involved for a long time. I think you're on the executive committee starting in 93, board president in 2013, currently serving as board chairman. I'm just curious, kind of how did that opportunity come about for you? And kind of, you've had a front row seat as the AJGA has sort of grown so tremendously. What has that experience been like for you?
Well, serving on the AJGA board has been the opportunity of a lifetime for me. I can't believe my good fortune to have been aligned with this organization. It started when I started moved to Florida and started running Golfweek, and I thought, I need to find a way to start to give back to this game that's been so good for me and for my family. And so I reached out to the executive director, a man by the name of Steve Hamlin, um, who ran the organization. I said, I don't know what this looks like, but I would like for Golf Week to be involved and support junior golf. And over time, it evolved, and I joined the board. Obviously, I parted ways with Golf Week, and when I launched Global Golf Post, we doubled down on our support of the AJGA, and as I said, I was on the board, and then I joined the executive committee. And all these years later, almost 3 decades, I find myself as the board chair. It is one of the most remarkable golf associations of any kind anywhere in the world. And the credit for that entirely goes to the executive director, Steve Hamlin.
Mm.
Yes, every brand name player that you've heard of on the men's PGA Tour, and most of the brand name players that you have heard of on the LPGA Tour, they grew up playing AJGA golf. Not
Right.
all,
But a lot.
but
Yeah.
most.
Yeah.
Tiger was our player of the year a couple of times. Phil came up through that. You can go down the years, down the list. Most recently, Jackson Coyven
Yeah.
was an AJGA player. Astros Talley, our current women's amateur champion, is
Yeah.
an AJGA player.
And
This
Stanford
is
commit, I have to add that, but go ahead.
and going to go play golf for my friend Annie Walker, to be
Yeah,
sure.
exactly.
This is where talented kids go to learn to compete.
Mm-hmm.
And our mission and purpose is simple. We're trying to enable kids with game, kids that can get the ball in the hole quickly, a chance to play in front of college coaches, earn financial aid to go to school, and play at the highest level of college. What happens to them beyond that, that's a function of their own skill, determination, heart. And many of them, as the names I just mentioned, they turn up on the pro tours, but that's derivative of what we do. What we're
Yeah.
just trying to do is enable you and your family to garner financial aid so as to go to Stanford or Oklahoma State or Northwestern or anywhere in the world where your skill level can take you. What we also are known for in the industry, not particularly known among consumers, is the number of young men and women who we hire through our internship program
Mm.
at a very young age, 22, 23, out of school, even kids that are in school for summer internships. And we train them, we mentor them, we give them a ton of responsibility at a young age. And many of them stay at the AJGA and make a career of it.
Mm-hmm.
But an equal number of them go off into the golf ecosystem and are making a difference across the board. I've said this half jokingly. If we were to have an alumni reunion of our interns in Ponte Vedra Beach, where the PGA Tour is located, or in Far Hills, New Jersey, where the USGA is located, we'd need a pretty good sized ballroom to pull that off.
Wow.
We have alums that are running state golf associations in places like Wisconsin, or running PGA sections like in Georgia. We have alums that are working at Augusta National. We have alums that are involved as college coaches. We've sent our young men and women willingly off into the world of golf and said, go, we're going to train you. And you might stay with us, and you can stay with us as long as you want. But if you decide that there's an avenue that you'd like to pursue in golf, we'll help you. And all of those organizations will happily take you on because they will know that you've been well trained, well mentored, and that they're very, very capable people. We're as proud of some of those alum as we are the Tiger Woods or the Jackson Coyvens or the Astros Tallies. They're remarkable people, and they're doing great stuff in golf.
That's very cool. I was not aware of that. It almost feels a little bit or sounds a little bit like the boat ride internship that the USGA does, because those have been sort of a launching pad for a lot of golf careers in the golf ecosystem. That's very impressive. That's cool. Um,
Very similar to the Boatwright program. The AJGA and the USGA have the exact same values when it comes to the game and the industry and developing younger talent.
wow, that's neat. And I know you've been involved in particular with I think it's the ACE grant program as part of the AJGA to help people, who may not have the financial ability who are skilled golfers, if I have that right.
Well, I cannot take an ounce of credit for the creation of the ACE grant, but in my time, in my 3 decades of service to the AJGA, that's probably the most important thing that we've done. But that is entirely a function of the work that Steve Hamlin has done. We had as a reputation back early on in my service at the AJGA, we were a rich kids tour. We
Hmm.
were country club kids, right?
Hmm.
Because it's expensive. Junior golf's expensive,
Yeah.
particularly at the highest level. If you're going to play, you're going to have to travel, and you're going to have good equipment, and you might have an instructor. It was expensive, and we had a bad rap. I'm not sure that it was completely undeserved early on, but we didn't like it at all. And so Stephen Hamlin created out of whole cloth the ACE grant program, which, in its simplest terms, it's a scholarship program. And
Hmm.
our proposition to young boys and girls was, look, if you can play, if you can get the ball in the hole fast enough, we'll take care of everything else. We'll cover your expenses to get you to tournaments, to be able to play in front of college coaches, to be able to play against top flight competition, to be able to play on wonderful golf courses. We got your back there. You just go play. And it's been, as I said, in my time, the most remarkable contribution that this organization has made to junior golf development in America.
Wow.
We're so terribly proud of Smiley Kaufman,
Hmm.
now best known as a television broadcaster, but he was the first ACE grant recipient to win a PGA Tour event.
Wow.
We have given away millions of dollars to young men and women to enable them to fulfill their dream of playing D1 college golf, men and women, and it's unfortunately maybe one of the best kept secrets in golf, but it's an extraordinary program, and I can't emphasize enough that it's Steve Hamlin that created this and his team, his very talented team that implemented it.
That is awesome. And I was not aware of it. I knew of the AJGA, but not the program. That is tremendous. Let me just quickly touch on a couple of other organizations that I know you've been involved with in golf, and curious what those experiences have been like. I mean, I saw your involvement, I think, with the Annika Foundation and also the Amateur Golf Alliance. So if you're not busy enough with everything else involved with those two, what would maybe briefly tell us what those have been like for you and the roles those organizations play?
As John Lynch would tell you, I'm Jesuit educated. I learned early on about the notion of men for others. You have to pay forward what you were fortunate
Yeah.
to receive. And so in golf, I've looked for opportunities to pay it forward. I've known Annika and her husband, Mike McGee, for some time. We became closer during my time at the AJGA because she sponsored our first tournament of the year. It was a women's event. It was held in Orlando. And I just was so taken with the fact that Mike and Annika and their 2 children, very young at the time, were part of this tournament from dawn to dusk. Annika didn't just write a check. She was all in, talking to kids, talking to parents, helping them, educating them, mentoring them. And one day she said to me, would you be willing to join my foundation board? And given the fact that I'd seen what she was doing and then understood how she's doing what she does with the AJGA around the world at tournaments, junior girls tournaments around the world, I thought, you know what? The least I can do to help is to help this woman because her head and her heart are all in. And so I gladly accepted a position on the foundation board of Annika's foundation. I'm very honored to have been asked to do so. and when and where I can help Annika and support her efforts to develop this game among junior girls around the world, it's a joy. I happen to have a young woman that I'm keeping an eye on. She's the daughter of one of my daughter's best friends from high school. This young lady's 8 years old.
Mm.
She's one step away from qualifying for the drive, chip, and putt program
Oh,
at Augusta this year. And I was fortunate to put her in front of Annika a couple months ago and have Annika take a look at her swing.
oh,
And
wow. Wow.
all I can say about this 8 year old girl's swing is, boy, I wish I had that action. And then the Amateur Golf Alliance is a fabulous organization. It's led by a guy named Alan Fidel from Ohio, who's become a good friend of mine over the last 15 years. And if there's somebody in America that cares more about mid amateur golf, about senior amateur golf, I haven't met that person.
Mm.
The AGA was created to advance mid amateur golf, senior amateur golf for men and women. The organization's best known for conducting a tournament called I'm drawing a blank here. Alan's going to kill me when he listens to this, but the concession cup,
Oh
which
yeah, the concession. I saw that. I read about that. Yeah.
it's a mid and senior amateur Walker and Curtis Cup or Ryder Cup, if you will. It
Yeah.
pits
Yeah.
our best mids and seniors, men and women, against Great Britain's best mids and seniors. And it's a remarkable competition. It's really created greater interest in the mid and senior amateur game among men and women. Once you graduate from amateur golf, and if you turn pro and it doesn't work out, or if you don't turn pro, you're looking for opportunities to compete because you never lose that desire to compete at a high level. And Alan and his team, led by a legendary uh, American amateur, Vinnie Giles, who hopefully
Oh
one day
yeah.
soon is properly enshrined in the World Golf Hall of Fame. They've created the AGA, the Amateur Golf Alliance, and they're doing really good stuff to advance mid and senior amateur golf in America. And I'm very proud to be a small part of the effort to do that.
Wow, that's cool. Well, listen, I'll get you out of here on this. We're talking about the state of, amateur golf and, people who don't go pro. I mean, kind of how do you, and you're well situated, I think, to answer this, given your involvement at all these different levels. I mean, how do you sort of assess the state of the game and in particular the amateur game as we sit here in 2026?
I think the amateur game in America is extremely healthy, not just at the grassroots, not just among the casual golfer, the casual consumer, the retail golfer, is Banadoon's Mike Kaiser calls them. But at the elite level, I'm not sure the game is ever been healthier. And getting better. On the women's side, it has struggled a little bit at the elite level because you're facing forces that are difficult to deal with that men don't have to face. You're dealing with family, you're dealing with marital opportunities, you're dealing with family raising. And so it's been hard for the women's mid amateur game, especially, to get traction because women are raising families.
Right.
And in many cases, they're also juggling a career at the same time. Golf kind of falls down relative to family and career. On the men's side, the opportunities to play as a mid amateur are growing, and in its elite competition, it's wonderful competition. And at the senior level, if you're a skilled senior, an elite senior, you could play in a competitive golf tournament 48 of 52 weeks a year in the
Wow.
United States.
Wow.
It's just remarkable. So I believe that the health of the amateur game in America at all levels, juniors to the AJGA, mid amateurs, senior amateurs, I'm not sure it's ever been healthier.
Yeah, no, that's impressive. And and I would just say, I mean, I'm so impressed that when you look back on and It's not like you're still not involved. Obviously, you are at a lot of levels, but you're founding the Global Golf Post, your realization of the changing landscape with Al Gore's invention, as you said. And it's just super impressive the way you guys have responded to that with such great success. So, Jim, it's great talking to you. I really appreciate you spending the time with us today. And again, congratulations on all the success, and I wish you continued success.
Larry, thank you. I have to give a shout out to my team. At Global Golf Post 17 or so years ago, I had an idea, but I had no way to implement or bring that idea to life. I have been surrounded by some of the most spectacular people, journalists and people who are inside, not writers, but creative directors and line editors. They're the people that took this idea I had, gave it life, gave it soul. And to this day, I'm grateful for all that they've done to help us build this brand, this business, and to make a difference in the game of golf around the world.
Well said. And again, for any of our listeners who haven't checked it out, it's a wonderful, wonderful publication, and urge you to do so. Jim, thank you again so much for making time for us today.
Larry, thank you for having me on. Cheers.
Take care. Bye bye.